All right, let's dive into one of the most brilliant and frankly hilarious scenes in all of theater, the at-home day from George Bernard Shaw's classic play Pygmalion. This is the exact moment when a huge social experiment goes wonderfully and horribly wrong. So, the whole thing kicks off with this completely audacious wager. You've got this brilliant, but let's be honest, incredibly arrogant phonetics professor, Henry Higgins. And he makes a bet with his buddy, Colonel Pickering, that he can take a common flower girl right off the streets of London, thick accent and all, and with nothing but pure scientific training, pass her off as a duchess.
So you got to understand, what we're about to see isn't just some polite social gathering. No, this is basically the first clinical trial for Higgins's human subject, Eliza Doolittle. It's her debut, her very first test flight into the world of the upper class. The pressure is on.
And where does this high-stakes test take place? At an at-home day. Think of it as a very formal, kind of stuffy afternoon tea party. And the host? Well, it's the one person Higgins can't just charm or bully his way past, his own mother. Mrs. Higgins is sharp, she's skeptical, and she is the absolute perfect judge of whether this whole transformation is real or just a flimsy costume. Now, Higgins isn't a complete fool. He knows this first outing is incredibly risky. He's pretty confident in Eliza's new accent, sure, but he's not at all confident in her ability to actually talk like a lady. So he sets up some very strict rules for his little experiment. That's it. 2 topics, the weather and everybody's health. He basically tells her she can only say things like, "What a lovely day," and "How do you do?" This just shows you how little faith he has in her. He's trained the voice, right? But he is absolutely terrified of the mind and the life experience that comes with it.
And who are the unsuspecting guinea pigs for this whole test? The Ensford Hill family. Now, we've actually met them before, way back in the first scene of the play, but they have absolutely no idea that they're about to meet that same flower girl again. They are the perfect stand-ins for the polite, easily impressed high society Higgins is trying to fool.
So in walks Eliza, and she makes her grand entrance. And you know what? Visually, it is a complete and total triumph. She's dressed beautifully, her posture's perfect, and when she opens her mouth and says, "How do you do?" her accent is absolutely flawless. The young son, Freddie, is instantly head over heels. At first, the experiment looks like a smashing success.
But then, the conversation actually starts. And Eliza, bless her heart, she tries to stick to the rules about health, but she can only talk about it in the way she knows. And this, right here, is where the genius of the scene really kicks in. She follows the letter of Higgins's law, but oh boy, does she violate its spirit.
And what you get is this incredible disconnect. With this perfect, crisp, upper-crust accent, Eliza just launches into this grim story about her aunt dying. She mentions that influenza done her in, but then she starts speculating that, well, maybe she was murdered. And why? For her new hat, of course. And this line just says it all. Delivered in the most delicate drawing room voice, this bit about a pinched straw hat is just completely absurd. The story is straight out of the London slums, but the delivery is pure high society. Higgins is mortified, but the guests, they're just completely baffled. And here's the kicker. The Ensford Hills are so wrapped up in their own little social bubble that they literally can't imagine this is real. They just assume her shocking stories must be the latest trend, some kind of fashionable new small talk. The daughter, Clara, thinks it's fantastic. And Freddie? Well, he's more in love than ever. They totally misread her authenticity as some kind of cool new slang. Okay, so the experiment is teetering on the absolute brink of disaster, but it's not over yet. As Eliza gets up to leave, the whole scene builds to its most famous, its most explosive, and really its most game-changing moment. So the ever-smitten Freddie, who is just desperate for a moment alone with this fascinating woman, asks if he can walk with her. A simple, polite, gentlemanly offer. Eliza's response, however, is, well, it's anything but. And there it is, the line that literally shocked audiences in 1912. Walk? Not bloody likely. I mean, to us, it's pretty mild, but back then, for a woman to use the word bloody in a polite setting, that was the social equivalent of setting off a bomb. The mask doesn't just slip, it absolutely shatters. The reactions to this outburst are just fascinating. They're totally split. Mrs. Ensford Hill is, of course, completely horrified. Freddie is still just as smitten as ever. But Clara?
Believing this is the cool new slang, she immediately starts using it herself, which of course horrifies her mother even more. It just goes to show how clueless and trend-obsessed their whole world is.
So after the guests leave, all the comedy just drains out of the room, and we're left with the cold, hard reality of the situation. And the only person who sees it clearly is Mrs. Higgins. She wasn't fooled for a second, and let me tell you, she is not amused.
Mrs. Higgins just delivers the final verdict on her son's little experiment. She tells him, look, while Eliza is a triumph of your teaching, it's a complete failure as a real transformation. Why? Because you can change an accent, but you can't just erase a person's life, their history, their whole way of seeing the world. Eliza gives herself away because she's still Eliza.
And then she pivots to the most important point, the massive ethical blind spot at the very center of this whole project. She asks the one simple, devastating question that neither Higgins nor Pickering ever bothered to ask themselves.
Seriously, what happens to her? Once the bet is won, once the game is over, what becomes of this woman that you've transformed? She can't go back to selling flowers on the street, but she doesn't really belong in high society either. What have you created, and what is your responsibility to her now?
This line right here is the moral center of the entire play. Mrs. Higgins just cuts through all the scientific nonsense and calls it what it is. Two overgrown children playing an irresponsible game with a human life, a live doll. They were so obsessed with whether they could do it, they forgot all about the person it was being done to.
And what's their answer to her massive question? It's just so vague and dismissive, it's almost insulting. Oh, we'll set her up in a flower shop or something. It is painfully obvious they haven't given it a single moment's thought. They figured out the how, but they never ever considered the what next.
And then Mrs. Higgins lays the final, damning paradox bare. You've given her the manners that stop her from being able to do honest hard work, but you haven't given her the income to live like a lady. You haven't lifted her up, you've trapped her between two worlds, where she doesn't belong in either one. And that's the question the play leaves us wrestling with. What is the true cost of playing God?